relationship is so important within, I'd say, the realm of any business and even real estate, because it's like Zig Ziglar has a quote. It's like people will do business with people that they trust.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, this is going to be fun.
yeah.
We're going to have a conversation with my friend Kyle McCrady, who we've just begun a relationship with, but man, it's been fun so far, Kyle. It's been fun just kind of dipping my toe into your life and seeing what's in there, who you are, what makes you tick. There's a lot more going on under the surface, I think, than most people that meet you just kind of casually realize. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit today. And so why don't you start with, what's this journey been like for you? Today you're sitting in this office in Longview as a RE/MAX realtor agent?
Yeah, realtor.
Realtor?
Yeah, agent, broker. Yeah.
Yeah,
agent.
you're working in real estate.
Yeah.
How did you get here? Because you grew up in town. You grew up in the city.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. Yeah, I always start my journey off in 2013 when I went to professional umpire school. I was a baseball player at Lower Columbia College prior to that, but it's been a long journey. Wow. Now that I look all
It
the way
gets
back,
longer every day.
I started umpiring amateur locally. Somebody who coached me growing up as a kid was just kind of like, hey, come out and make some extra money umpiring baseball. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. So I was like, all right, I'll go out and, make $25 a game, $35 a game. I didn't have a job. So I started young. I just got done playing college baseball. I decided to move on from that at that time. And I started umpiring local Babe Ruth Little League and all that stuff. And I was like, man, I really like this. I'm pretty good. I'm young. I seem to fit the part
People
well.
like me as an umpire.
It was people would compliment me based on the job that I did. And I was like, oh man, it felt good. So I really had no idea what I was doing when I started. So I was like, man, I really don't even know what's going on. So I really need to get trained.
Yeah.
So I started doing some camps and some clinics with some local people who helped facilitate some learning and some education in the umpiring realm. And I met somebody who was a minor league baseball umpire at the time. And I was like, what's your story? How did you do it? What are you doing? And he's like, I'm working my way up to the big leagues. And I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. He's like, yep.
What did you think when you heard that? Is that possible?
I was just so intrigued. I was like, man, he does this for a living. And I was like, I could do that. So I just asked him how he did it. And he was like, I went to umpire school. And just kind of, that's where I started. And so it was I was still about 2.5 years away from going to umpire school at that time. But I told my parents, I was like, this is what I want to do. And they're like, great. Finish your 4-year degree and then you can go. And I was like, okay. So I just stuck around doing amateur stuff for the next 2.5 years, and got my degree in business from Washington State University. And then once I graduated from college, I was like, I'm gone. I already knew what I wanted to do. I'm going to go to umpire school and I'm going to become a Major League Umpire. So I went to school and I got trained. It's like military boot camp when you're there. It's pretty intense, 6 weeks, 6 days a week, 9 to 10 hours a day, classroom session in the morning, and then you're getting trained out on the field, and you're just learning, man, starting from ground zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were an athlete, so you knew what training was like. You had a value for putting in time and working hard.
I always liked physical fitness. I was an athlete, took care of myself. So that type of training and that type of intensity wasn't new.
You remember your first game? Professional?
My first professional game. Yeah, I got put in the Arizona League. I do remember my first game. I still have some pictures prior to the game. Yeah, I do remember. My first four were actually pretty significant because they were all down in Arizona at that time before I moved up to the Northwest League, like shortly after that. So, yeah.
So it wasn't quite what you thought it was going to be.
No.
It was really hard.
It was challenging. My first, man, I love home. So, I just loved home. I love Longview, Kelso. I love the local area. And I struggled being gone for a long time, really for my whole entire career. It's just, I'm grateful for the journey that I was on, but I never was bent, and made to live that type of lifestyle.
Yeah.
So,
But you didn't know until you did it.
right.
And then when you got in and thought, whoa,
Yeah.
this is really difficult.
Yeah.
At what point, how long did you do it before you ended up pulling the plug on it?
Let's see here. I got in 2013. I resigned in 2021. So 8
That's
years.
quite a run.
Yeah.
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 You probably had some pretty cool experiences along the way.
Yeah. A lot of good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did it feel when you stopped?
It was a relief. It was
Yeah.
like I had it's a powerful story because I was not a Christian coming into baseball. I was very agnostic. I was raised in a Catholic church, but I didn't necessarily understand a lot of the stuff. Like, my faith is a big, huge component of my life. It is my life. And like, first and foremost, I'm a follower of the Lord.
Yeah.
And I never really understood. I never even, like, growing up in the Catholic Church, I didn't even believe that Jesus walked the face of the earth. Like, the priest or whoever in the Catholic Church preaches up front, I was just like, I didn't comprehend or understand, the things that he was saying.
Yeah.
In regards to the gospel. And I always say this too, that like a praying mom is the reason why I got saved. And saved my life, because my life has been marked with very trying experiences, especially in terms of like deep healing and stuff.
Right.
So just from growing up in a culture of the world, family systems, cultural systems, stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of healing and wholeness that Jesus has brought about just through walking in faith.
It sounds like you feel like you really, truly got rescued by God.
Oh yeah, yeah. I lived a pretty destructive lifestyle prior to being saved, and then even the process of coming out of the world too. That has been a powerful testimony. Wow. And healing and deliverance as well too. So,
but you made it, and how long has it been since you felt like you were on solid ground? How many years?
In terms of
just spiritually, personally?
Oh man, probably 2 or 3.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's pretty new still, that feeling of like, okay, this is good, this is right, this is where I want to live my life, this feels right.
Yeah.
And so you've had 2 or 3 years to begin to acclimate to that environment. Yeah. What do you think now?
It's like the sky's the limit, and I love just the power and like the awness and just God's ways, like what he does, like, and how he brings us to the point through the shakings and through the healings and through the process of making us whole, of like all that stuff. Because like I never would, looking back, just especially with, not this last year has been a lot of restoration in terms of a lot of things, like miraculous restoration of things that were previously broken, that like you would look at them and you'd be like, a normal person would be like, oh, there's no way. And then all of a sudden it's like God and his ways and his grace, it's like you're just like, you look back and you're like, wow, he did it.
And you're talking about a person too, because like a couple months ago you got married.
Yeah.
And that whole process was, I mean, we don't have to go into it at all, but I know that's a very personal thing, but that whole process was restoration.
Yeah.
That relationship that got restored, and now you're married. And what do you think about being a husband? Do you like that?
It's challenging at times. It's definitely new.
Yeah.
Yeah, big transition when we first started, coming together and living together as one. And still, it's an interesting transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about your field of endeavor right now. You are a real estate agent.
mm-hmm.
That's a whole different culture
Yeah.
that you're having to learn and figure out where you fit. And I know that there's a pretty big learning curve as you're going into real estate. But you're bringing in a pretty solid foundation into real estate too, which is not uncommon. It seems like a lot of believers, followers of Jesus, end up gravitating towards real estate because it's a way for them to serve people.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like it to me. Is that part of the motivation?
Yeah, I think naturally, that wasn't the reason why I started, that's for sure. The reason why I started is I had resigned from baseball and I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was praying one morning and I was like, Lord, whatever it is, because I just took a big leap of faith walking away from baseball, having no idea what I was going to do, and being like, Lord, I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. So whatever it is, make it very apparent so that I don't miss it. And the powerful testimony is this: I was praying that morning and I prayed that prayer and I walked into a doctor's office, and somebody who had walked in right behind me, who I hadn't seen for a really long time, who I was familiar with, was like, hey, how's baseball going? And I was like, I don't know, I resigned. He's like, really, what are you doing now? And I was like, honestly, I don't really even know.
Yeah.
And he was like, have you thought about real estate? And I was like, well, funny. Because prior to him walking into those doors, I was looking down in a magazine, and there was a house on the magazine, and I just kind of looked up and I just kind of pondered, and more than likely just a thought from the Lord, like a question, like, what about real estate? And then he walked in right behind and said,
he opened a door for you.
Yeah, and when he said that, I was like, I just kind of looked and I was like, interesting. And then, he kind of ended up, this man started kind of introduced me to the process of real estate and how it works. Yeah. And I was like, dang, like at first I was like, yeah, I could substitute teach, because I was substitute teaching at the time. I could substitute teach and do a little bit of real estate on the side. I don't want to go full bore into real estate. Like, I don't really want to live that sort of lifestyle, hustling and all that stuff. And I started taking courses, the education courses to take the real estate exam for the state of Washington and the national exam. And after a while, I was just kind of like, well, if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it, and just go all in and just let's go. So it didn't start out with how can I serve people. So it has evolved to that point where I have noticed God forming his character within me.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you cut corners and if it is about just the money, it'll be exposed. And it's just it's stuff that I've even had to walk through myself, for God to flush that stuff out of me,
My youngest daughter is actually, she just signed for her first house.
Right.
Her and her husband did. It was a traumatic journey.
Yeah.
Through these last couple of years of trying to find a house, actually being able to make an offer and the offer get accepted and then make it through the process. It was an emotional roller coaster for them. So you find yourself now chaperoning people through that process. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know what it's like, what it feels like. I remember the first time we sat down and signed the papers on our house. The only house we've ever owned is the one we live in now. Yeah. And I remember looking at that number going, oh my gosh, I'll never have enough money to pay for this house ever. Yeah. and we bought our house for $50,000 a long time ago. I mean, that's just crazy where we've come, and how much pressure is on young people to try to make that transition. How would you describe how it feels to sit with somebody and feel like you can actually help them through that process?
Yeah, when you get to the end of the process, obviously in the middle where you're educating and you're communicating and you're like, you just want to make sure that, for me personally, I can be over the top in terms of just being very clear about the process through the transaction, because not everybody is educated in real estate and how it works. So it's like, all right, there's so many moving parts, there's so many different parts to it that just to educate people, it's like drinking from a fire hose at times during a transaction.
Can you see that in their face and hear that in their voice when they're going,
yeah, there's just a lot to it, and even in my own process too, I've noticed it being like, oh man, this is a lot, and it's like I got to communicate this to a first-time home buyer, like, and make them feel comfortable within the midst of it, and ultimately they are responsible for their own decisions that they make as well too. So, yeah. However, after every transaction that I've done, regardless of the amount of money, regardless of the type of property, there has always been a sense of, I mean, I just equate it to the awe of God, but like, it's just like, wow. It's like a tremendous amount of gratitude, because the other person is so grateful that you help them.
yeah,
And that most of the times in real estate, like, they're looking for, a lot of times I've come across, my clients have been looking for relief of something that has been a burden to them. So when they get to the end of it and they're finally released of it, they're just like, wow, like, thank you so much. And it's just like, when a transaction closes, it's like, wow, that's a really powerful experience.
Do you feel like there's a relationship that gets formed?
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like it. It
There
seems like
has
a
to
really
be.
fast dating process.
Yeah, there has to be, and that's why aspects of it are so tough, because relationship is so important within, I'd say, the realm of any business and even real estate, because it's like, Zig Ziglar has a quote. It's like, people will do business with people that they trust.
Yeah.
And it's tough in a transactional society of creating the relationship where to foster trust between you and the client.
Yeah.
And sometimes it fosters, and sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, and you're working with that person, it doesn't make for a smooth transaction. You just want to make sure the fostering of the trust is there. That's why predominantly, so far the business has come from people that I know. So they already know me, they already know about me, they already know my story, parts of my story.
Yeah.
Part of the trust is already there. Whereas when it comes to people that I don't know, who I meet, for the very first time, that can be more of a challenging process to foster the trust.
Right.
So
how, this is probably like the lamest way to put this, but how do you integrate your faith with your profession? Because that always interests me, how people take who they are and become that person in a profession. I assume that you have a high value for being the same person, whether you're walking somebody through a real estate deal or whether you're sitting next to somebody at church.
Yeah, I just try that character, the holiness that God calls us to be holy, because I am holy, like, first and foremost, so like, to have him build that character within me, and then just to be authentic and carry it with me, to be like, not to compartmentalize it, be like, hey, my faith is my faith and my business is my business. But like, that's a Greek mindset. Like, the Hebrew mindset culminates and combines all of them into one, where it's like, God is not separate from my business is not separate from God. Like, I am not separate from any of those things. It's all integrated into one. Family, business, faith, it's all one. So it's like, how do I walk that out as one in balance, and I don't know, like, I love just the fire of the Lord, where he like sets us on fire. And I just want to cultivate that, like, even when I show up to my office every day, like, am I praying for my office? Like, am I praying for people in my office? Am I talking about Jesus with people in my office? I mean, one of the most profound statements I heard 2 weeks ago was like, how do we bring people to Christ? We talk about Jesus with non-believers.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do, because I'm like, oh, but more as I pray for boldness, it's like, no, this is my identity and this is what I stand for.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't have to be forceful about it, but it's just like, you'd be surprised, like, how many people you really can talk to Jesus about and be like, you know, not them.
They don't freak out.
Yeah, they don't shy away.
Yeah.
I think we have this common misconception, and this is even me personally, that if because of my background of from 18 to 25, 26, of my perception that I had of Christians and Jesus, given my background, that everybody is that way.
Right.
But it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we go into things thinking they don't really want to hear what I have to say.
Right.
And yet, you're really interested in what you have to say. I mean, like, you're being authentic. This is really important to me. I'm not trying to put on a show for you. This is a really big deal for me.
Yeah.
Like, when I was pastoring, a lot of times what I would say to people who were considering, who were walking through a really difficult situation in their life, like divorce or some kind of breakup or something like that, I would say to them, this is before I was pastoring, I would say, I don't know how you do that without a relationship with God. It's just like, it seems unfathomable that you can get through this thing unscathed.
Yeah.
And people would look at me and they would like want to know more about the God part.
Yeah.
And all I did was say, I don't know how you do this without him.
Yeah.
I didn't really preach at him. And a lot of times those doors open for us. And I'm really glad that you are doing what you're doing, Kyle. I mean, you're doing a really good job of being you in a really authentic way. And I know that maybe in the past that wasn't necessarily the case, that you didn't necessarily like the person you are, but it's obvious that you really like who you are and what you're doing and where God is taking you right now. So this is a really exciting part of your journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a culmination of a lot of things, you know. Baseball, God used that to bring me to Christ. And then, like, he really brought about some deep healing and deliverance through the process of coming out of baseball and transitioning into real estate. And, like, now, like, obviously we're not perfected until we die. But, like, the process of the perfection right now is, like, it's actually a really fun process to even be a part of, just be like, all right, wow, he's doing a lot of things even within me, you know. So it's just a lot of fun, like, just to walk it out with him, you know, and just to know, like, to trust him.
Yeah.
He hasn't, like, to trust him in that process, you know. It may not be necessarily what the process that I want to go through at times, or it may not look exactly like how I think it should look or how I think it's going to look. But when you start looking at it, you're like, wow, this is actually really fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
well, all I can say is well done.
Thanks.
You're doing well.
Thanks.
And I'm glad that we have you in this community right now to enjoy all the things that you're doing. And I can't wait to see what Jesus has ahead for you. I know that things are going to change and they're going to get better and they're going to get bigger and it's going to expand. And it's not because you're perfect or excellent or successful. It's because you're following Jesus and he leads us into that kind of stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. It's been, this is actually really cool for me. I didn't mention it when I first started, but, like, it's an honor to be on because of, just what you're doing with the city and city serve and the connection that's being brought that normally would not have been brought had it not been for, like, what you're doing, you know. And it's actually really exciting to see it in its infancy stage and then just to watch it grow. So,
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.